Hey everyone, so this is the 3.3 notes, very short today with this. So remember that the cosine of theta is x over r, while the sine of theta is y over r, right? So what we can do here, so if you notice it says x equals and y equals, so what we're going to do is we're going to take those original uh, sine and cosine equations, and we're going to manipulate them so that we end up with x equals. And in order to do that, we have to multiply by r on both sides. And that gives me that x equals the radius times cosine theta, and y equals the radius times sine theta. So that's what's going to be written up here. R times cosine theta, comma, r times sine of theta. Okay, so now we're just going to go straight into the questions. Now, the questions, they have a lot of information, and really the only things I care about are that circle is centered at the origin, given radius, what are the points of intersection, okay? Now, to figure that out, the points of intersection are going to be that r times cosine of theta, comma, r times the sine of theta. So those are going to be your coordinates for your point of intersection. So r is 6. So 6 times something and 6 times something else. Now, remember that here I have a pi over 6, right? So that means that my reference angle that I'm going to use here is pi over 6. And pi over 6 on our unit circle was square root of 3 over 2, comma, 1 half. Okay, now 5 pi over 6 is actually located in quadrant 2. So using my all students take calculus, I know that in quadrant 2, only my sign is positive. So that means that only 1 half is going to be a positive number, x is going to be negative. So now I'm just going to go ahead and multiply both of these. So in this first example, 6 times negative square root of 3 over 2, well, I can simply remember that 6 is 6 over 1, and then I can cross simplify. So that's going to be 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, leaving me with negative 3 square root of 3, comma, and then 6 times 1 half, well, that's just 6 divided by 2, so 3. And that's it. Those are your points of intersection. Now, I'm going to look at the next one, which gives me a radius of 7. So 7 times cosine of theta, comma, 7 times my sine of theta. And then they make it really simple because it's pi over 3. And pi over 3 is in the first quadrant, meaning that both x and y are positive. And remember that pi over 6 and pi over 3 are opposites, right? So if pi over 6 is square root of 3 over 2, comma, 1 half, pi over 3 is 1 half, comma, square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so then I can just go ahead and say, okay, well, 7 times 1 half, comma, 7 times square root of 3 over 2. And that gives me, I'm going to leave it as the fraction, 7 halves, comma, 7 square root of 3 over 2. So those are my 2 points of intersections. Now, for part 3, 4, and 5, it's basically the opposite. I'm going in the opposite direction, right? They're giving me the points of intersection, and they're saying, what is the radius and theta, right? So in this first example, the first thing I can tell, notice that both x and y are square root of 2 over 2. There's nothing else that's different about them. Those are the values for pi over 4 that we've been seeing, right? So that means that my radius has to be 1. Okay. And remember that a radius, I got this question a couple times during this lesson. Radius can never be negative. Okay. It's a measurement. It's a measurement from the center of a circle to any point. So it's always going to be positive. It's distance, right? So my radius is 1. And then I notice, okay, well, x is positive and my y is negative. That means that I have to be in quadrant 4, right? Because in quadrant 4, only my x is positive. So that means that theta is going to be 7 pi over 4. Now remember, based on the quadrant, you have a specific value for your radians, right? For every pi over 4, there is 1 located in each of the 4 quadrants. So you need to realize that when looking at number 3 and finding out that it's in quadrant 4, then you have to know then that's 7 pi over 4. So again, memorization of the unit circle is very, very important. And if you can find the tricks, it's actually a lot simpler than you might think. All right. So looking at the next one, I have negative and negative. So automatically in my head, quadrant 3. So I want to also include, I'm going to redraw this little grid just so it's a little bit bigger. And then it's going to be plus, comma, plus, negative, comma, plus, negative, comma, negative, and positive, comma, negative. So those are your x and y values for each coordinate, okay? I think it's good to visualize both the All Students Take Calculus as well as the little coordinate showing which one is positive and which one is negative. So now back to this one. So I notice I have this square root of 3 over 2, right? I know square root of 3 over 2 belongs with pi over 6, right? But there is something that is not normally there, and that's the 3 in the front. That means that my radius has to be 3, right? Because if I multiply, remember my usual square root of 3 over 2, comma 1/2. If I had a radius of 3, what would happen is I would get negative 3 square root of 3 over 2, comma, negative 3/2. So my radius has to be 3. Now I need to figure out my theta. So I'm looking at a pi over 6, okay? And pi over 6 in pi over 6 reference angle in the unit circle in quadrant 3. I need to verify, but I believe it is, I want to say 7 pi over 6, but I just want to confirm. Yeah, 7 pi over 6. I know quadrant 4 was 11 pi over 6. All right, now the last one. So this last one, I feel like when you look at it immediately, you want to say it's going to be, oh, this is a pi or a pi over 2 or something like that, because there's no fractions, right? But when you actually look at the values, you can see the radical, right? That radical is only ever in a pi over 6 or a pi over 3. Now, depending on whether it's in the x or the y. Now, in this case, it's in the y, meaning that my radians, my theta is going to be square root of 3, but I need to find the right quadrant, so I shouldn't have done that so close. But I recognize that it's pi over 3. So now the real question is, how did I go from negative 2, or from negative 1/2 to negative 2. And how did I go from square root of 3 over 2 to just 2 square root of 3? So that the only way that happens is if my radius is able to cancel out the denominator, meaning the radius has to be 4. Why? Because if I had negative 1/2 times 4, comma, 4 times square root of 3 over 2, what I would get is negative 4/2, comma, 2 square root of 3. And then that will be simplified to negative 2 comma 2 square root of 3. And then because my cosine is negative, that means that this is in the second quadrant, meaning it's at 2 pi over 3. Okay? And that is the end of 3.3. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy studying.